What kind of state is Mississippi? Well, they call it the Magnolia State. Its population, 2,100,000, of which 900,000 are Negro, the highest percentage of Negroes in any state. According to Mississippi State University, the average income in 1963 was $1,363. That's about half the national average and the lowest of all the states. Cotton is still king in Mississippi. The state boasts the largest single cotton plantation in the world, and more than half its people earn their livelihood from the soil. But new industry is coming in, and a slow change is taking place. Statistically, then, Mississippi can claim to be a state growing industrially and broadening economically. But there are two views of every picture, and in Mississippi they are drawn in black and white. CBS News reporter David Shoemaker got one view from the senior senator from Mississippi, James O. Eastland of Sunflower County.
We have more peace and harmony in Mississippi than any state in the Union. People are employed and are prosperous. We don't have any racial friction. It's mighty good to live in Mississippi.
Some Negroes charge that they face intimidation if they try to register and vote, that their houses are burned, or they're bombed, or they're threatened with the loss of their job.
No, I don't. If there's no intimidation in the state, there's no attempt to prevent Negroes from registering to vote.
I came to the United States Senate, a 29-year-old fellow, out of the civil rights movement, a public defender, and turns out one of my closest friends ends up being Strom Thurmond.
There's not enough troops in the army to force the Southern people to break down segregation and admit the Negro race into our theaters, into our swimming pools, into our homes, and into...
You got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook, man.
Now, Joe is famous.
We must take back the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street.
So let's talk more deeply about the crime bill and
Senator Joe Biden's involvement in that and where you see his trajectory today?
Well, I mean, it was his signature issue really throughout the 1980s. As I mentioned earlier, you know, he teamed up with Strom Thurmond, this sort of very aged old segregationist from South Carolina. And it was really, you know, Joe, he thought this was going to really propel him to the top. As he said to a former aide who told me, I think it was around about 1990, the aide was telling me how Joe was always trying to hold hearings on crime and drugs. Every week, his poor staff had to sit around dreaming up a new excuse for a hearing on crime and drugs. And as Biden said to his staffer, he said, when people hear the words crime and drugs, I want them to think Joe Biden. I mean, he was really running, you know, like George Bush Sr. on a sort of Willie Horton. You know, it's astonishing that this man, this politician, should be considered a front runner for the Democrats.
Now, could he simply say?
Chairman, let me start out with this. I am ashamed of my vote. I sincerely apologize to my God, I apologize to my community, to my family. That was the worst vote, as I look back over the years, that I've taken since I've been in the Congress.
Do you regret your advocacy for the crime bill?
Well, look, I supported the crime bill. My husband has apologized. He was the president who actually signed it. Senator Sanders voted for it. I'm sorry for the consequences that were unintended and that have had a very unfortunate impact on people's lives.
Because I signed a bill that made the problem worse. And I want to admit it. But in that bill, there were longer sentences. And most of these people are in prison under state law, but the federal law set a trend. And that was overdone. We were wrong about that. Here's what happened. Vice President Biden, you guys know Vice President Biden, whose family comes from Scranton. He was the chairman of the committee that had jurisdiction over this crime bill. I had an assault weapons ban in it. I had money for inner city kids for out-of-school activities. We had 110,000 police officers so we could put people on the street, not in these military vehicles, and the police would look like the people they were policing. We did all that. And Biden said, you can't pass this bill, the Republicans will kill it if you don't put more sentencing in.
Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, I'm ashamed that I voted for the '94 crime bill. You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. In fact, I drafted the bill, as you remember.
I know that.
So I'm curious how you're going to really repair a lot of the black and brown communities that have been ravaged by the war on drugs and mass incarceration, specific policies that you're outlining for that.
That's a good essay question and a good question. Folks, let's get something straight. 92 out of every 100 prisoners behind the bars are in a state prison, not a federal prison. This idea that the crime bill generated mass incarceration, it did not generate mass incarceration.
Now the campaign's position that the crime bill did contribute to mass incarceration?
Victor, I think the vice president, his comments speak for themselves. What is very clear is
his comment was that it does not contribute to mass incarceration. The former president who signed it said it did.
Look, Victor, if we play the whole clip, what he also said was, his comment was, what he also said was that the majority of folks that are incarcerated were incarcerated at the state level.
And there's a reason for that. Let me put up the truth in sentencing incentives here.
And I mean, there is a reason for that.
But there's a reason. Let me put it up. Let me put it up on the screen, guys. The truth in sentencing section of the 1994 crime bill. This is page 21. It incentivized It offered billions of dollars to build new correctional facilities if states would increase the percentage of convicted violent offenders, increase the average prison time, increase the percentage of the sentence was there. Did this bill not incentivize putting more people in jail and keeping them there longer?
Victor, I am not going to sit here and tell you the crime bill was perfect. There was some really great preventative things that it did. It took on the NRA, and then there was an overcorrection.
We say we don't want mandates to the states from the federal government. Yet the House crime bill now mandates for them to get money for prisons. They have got to keep every prisoner in jail like we do federally 85% of the time for which they're sentenced. Right now, they're only kept in jail in the states on average 41% of the time. I like the idea they keep in jail longer. I'm the guy that wrote the bill, so I'm all for tougher enforcement. But these guys just went through this whole mandate debate saying, hey, don't tell the states what to do. And now they're telling the states, but by the way, we're changing the crime bill. That was going to give you money to help alleviate your prison problem if you do what we do federally and only if you do what we do federally.